Hey guys, what's up? Stock Retail coming back to you. And you can see I want to talk today about why in the world is Netflix continuing to swirl in the middle of discussions on theatrical content. And you might say on the surface level, well, they're just, trying to own the market in terms of streaming and make their money and all of that. And so, of course, they're going to put marketing spin and say that streaming is the way. But here's what's been happening. It's been really weird over the years to kind of watch Netflix take some really odd positions with regards to streaming. And then, even weirder still, the last week or two, go back and look at my last two videos where there's been just fantastic news after fantastic news in the theatrical industry. Obviously, while AMC's stock has been getting hit, and while voices like Rich Greenfield and a few others have gotten extra, extra loud, trying to take knocks at the theatrical industry and trying to praise the streaming industry. So we're going to take a look at a couple things, and I'm going to put some even. First, we're going to talk facts. If you guys have followed my channel a while, we try to stay there. I talk about facts over FUD. I try to be a sort of reasoned, objective voice here. But I am going to give you some speculation too, because I was just thinking it's just too weird. And I'm a person who spots patterns, connects dots, and the level to which certain players in the network or the cabal have gotten really, really noisy in the face of all this good news and theatrical. It just smelled a little bit to me. And so I want to talk about why is Netflix so central, and where is that coming from? And so why is theatrical success really a wrench in perhaps a plan? So we'll have a little bit of tinfoil in this video, but that can be fun too, right? So let's just dive right in. I had posted this on X, I think last night or maybe 2 nights ago. I don't even really remember. But if you look, so there was this news that Happy Gilmore 2 was breaking records in terms of cost. Yes, it was. I would even say, I don't think it's a problem saying that Happy Gilmore was a success in terms of a streaming film. And I say success in terms of the first few days had a lot of hits, right? Had a lot of watch. I did not watch it, and that's a shame because I was a big fan of Happy Gilmore. Like I was probably like right at the end of college for me, or maybe beginning of college. Those are years where a movie like that was really funny, and so I have a lot of good memories with my friends. But when they went straight to streaming with this, I was like, I'm just not that interested. It doesn't hold water for me, pun intended in terms of Waterboy, right? So if you were a fan of Adam Sandler, he made a lot of movies for my generation. Kind of we laughed at those. But here's the thing: it also set records in terms of the cost. And I was sitting there going, man, this is ridiculous. You guys know I have two master's degrees in business. I have an MBA and I have a master's in supply chain. Got those a few years apart. And here's the thing, like you do a lot of case studies when you study business. And even if you don't know how to do business case studies, honestly, you guys are just going to say duh to this. So I just am going to present a side by side to say, which of these business models make sense? And what I want you to think about is people like making money, right? Most times big money is unemotional in that if there's money on the table, they go for it, even if it kind of makes them have to say they were wrong, right? In general, you don't reject making more money. So what you need to be asking as I show you this is why then, in the face of theatrical being so successful lately, in the face of Skydance and Warner Brothers and Sony and Disney and others saying we're going to invest even more in theatrical because we're making so much money, and in the face of the facts I'm about to show you, then why is Rich Greenfield and Ted Sarandos of Netflix and a few others getting so hyper spinning and very loud? Because if it's not about money, then what is it about? And honestly, you ask yourself for businesses, what is it ever about other than money? I'm not talking about values and things here, but the thing is, when someone is running a business and leaves money on the table, it starts to beg other questions. That's my point. So let's just break this down. All right, so production cost. You just think like a business person for a minute, and which of these models appeals to you? Let's say you are a private investor and you're going to invest, in this case, in Warner Brothers. I suppose in other cases, let's talk Paramount, let's talk Disney, Sony, just theatrical as a whole versus streaming, right? And so production costs, they spent $152 million making Happy Gilmore 2. Now remember Electric City, what was that? I'm sort of transposing numbers because I can't remember if it was 230 or $320 million to make, and I think it was 320. So that was pretty ridiculous. By the way, side note, sorry to be distracted here, but did you know if you ever transpose two numbers and you you figure out the difference between them, it's always divisible by 9. So there's just a super random factoid for you. But anyway, so weapons, very much less production cost than Happy Gilmore, right? But let's now keep going. And weapons, by the way, this should be fair. I'm not comparing some massive blockbuster. We're not talking Avatar versus Happy Gilmore here. So you keep in mind, too, that there's plenty of other theatrical movies that would do way better than this. So global box office, obviously Happy Gilmore, there's just none to speak of. There is no global box office. Weapons doing $270 to $300 million. Those are the most current industry forecasts. You know, we're like halfway through, maybe more than that. For kind of it reaching those numbers. And so at this point with movies, you can pretty reasonably forecast where they're going to land once you've got a few weeks. So this is it will be a pretty accurate forecast. Weapons is going to land somewhere, let's call it 270 plus at the global box office. And it only cost 38 to make. Meanwhile, Happy Gilmore had 4 times the cost, exactly actually, funny enough, and 0 global box office. All right, so online rentals. Right, so when Weapons is done, it's not that it just goes to streaming. Now you have the online rentals and online purchases. I should have put rentals and purchases, right? So then there's more revenue that we're going to have to count for Warner Brothers in addition to the box office. Now, granted, they keep, like, let's say half of the box office. You know, AMC and other cinema chains get to keep about half of admissions, and then the studios take about half. Well, in the meantime, then Warner Brothers is going to turn around and have online rentals and online sales, adding to the revenue on that. And how about physical media? Some of you like buying the 4K DVDs and the Blu-rays and all that stuff. Happy Gilmore, at least I've never seen Netflix actually sell a product. You know, their whole thing is streaming, right? So there's no rentals, there's no streaming, there's no paid streaming, and there's no physical media to sell. Whereas Warner Brothers will also have revenue from physical media sales. How about the shared community experience? There will be about 30 million people globally who will go see Weapons. So there's this viral moment, there's this community experience that is brand enhancing. You guys know that I worked at Nike for 21 years. We were pretty fixated on brand presence and brand perception and brand buzz and all of these types of things. And we had all kinds of surveys. We were constantly looking at tracking where our brand was and how we were trending and all of that. Well, Weapons is creating a brand enhancing moment for Warner Brothers. Now you could argue, so let's talk business class for a minute, right? We want to be objective. Let's not be overly kind of AMC hypey. Happy Gilmore absolutely created buzz, right? But I would suggest the buzz from Weapons is longer living and more authenticated because of the theatrical experience. Happy Gilmore was more like a flash moment. You know, I saw it in my feed for a couple days. People watched it right away and then it was done. It's not like you have as much of the water cooler moment, people kind of saying, oh, you got to go see this type of stuff, like something that happened with Sinners, which, you know, that was even a whole other level from Weapons, right? And then streaming on your own platform. Okay, so finally Happy Gilmore shows up. Netflix has Happy Gilmore now living on their platform. Meanwhile, oh, guess what? Warner Brothers will have Weapons living on their platform. So sure, you didn't release on streaming. Perhaps the launch itself will not have as many views. But what I'll continue to remind you guys, and you can fact check this, the leaders of Paramount, Skydance, Warner Brothers, and Sony and others have all confirmed, I just can't remember if Disney has said this out loud, but they've all confirmed that when a film does well in theatrical, they get more, not less, more streaming views. So I keep using the example that Top Gun Maverick continues to pretty much be the #1 viewed movie on Paramount, and it's at this point several years old, right? So, you know, had Happy Gilmore been a big hit in theaters, I would say it's pretty well proven in terms of a use case or a thesis at this point that does not detract from your streaming views. Of course, Netflix, that's the central, you know, core of their strategy. So you ask yourself, all right, now it's got worse costs and far, far, far worse revenue outlook than even just Weapons. And now let's talk about, you know, I shared with you on a recent video, Warner Brothers broke their own record. Weapons was the 6th movie in a row for them that had a $40 million or bigger domestic box office opening weekend. And so it's not just Weapons that's out there. Now, if you want to see Minecraft and Sinners and Weapons And right now, in the moment, I'm kind of forgetting, forgive me, Warner Brothers, but I'm forgetting a couple of the other big ones they've had recently. But boy, it's been a lot. It's been a heck of a run for them. It's gone real well. That is contributing to people wanting to have the HBO Max platform and be subscribing members, right? So I don't think Netflix can argue that the theatrical strategy of Warner Brothers is some kind of miss. And certainly, I do believe you can absolutely. If I was, well, I say if, some of you know I'm going to teach a business class this fall at university. Now it's a supply chain class, so it's not going to be a financial class. But if I was teaching kind of a case study type of a business class, I would be looking at this and saying, huh, you have more costs and less revenue. Why are you not pursuing a different strategy here, right? So let's start asking that. And I think we have to kind of, actually, there's one more point. So here's the crazy thing. You guys see that, a year or two after films are on streaming, what happens? They show up on Netflix. Recently, I kind of teased them a little, I don't know, it was a few months ago, because they were kind of bragging about a couple movies they were showing, getting a lot of clicks. But these were like year and a half old movies that they're paying the other studios so that they can host it on Netflix. So at some point, not only, I should have had another row here, right? Like, I don't think Warner Brothers is ever going to pay Netflix to show Happy Gilmore. Never say never, I suppose, but I haven't seen that business model. Whereas Netflix at some point is going to pay Warner Brothers to show Weapons, and that's going to be more revenue for Warner Brothers. So for Netflix to stay relevant, it even has to pay to show other studios' content. A little bit silly. But all right, so you just kind of ask yourself, and here was starting to be my thought. If you followed me a while, I'm very into Bitcoin. You know that I love the fact that it is a decentralized movement. It is taking sort of separation of money and state and moving it more to a peer-to-peer. You've got these trustless transactions. You don't necessarily need middlemen, and you don't have the control of the central banks who can print money. I'm not trying to make this a Bitcoin video, but the point is to establish I am someone who has been very interested in decentralization from the beginning. And I do believe that what I call the grand experiment of America was, in a way, if you kind of look at it now through the hindsighting of history, a decentralization experiment, right? What did we have? We had distributed power, we had balances of power, we had citizen government. It is moving from a single king to a large group of governors, right? And when I say governors, I'm talking about our whole entire government. And so the intent, I believe, was decentralization. Bitcoin is decentralization. I think America was decentralization. And so think about this now for a second. Let's say that Netflix had won and gained kind of monopolistic control, that Theatrical, that Rich Greenfield gets his grandest dream. I wanted to call it a certain type of dream, but I think you guys get what I'm saying. I try to keep it a little tame here, anyway. So Rich Greenfield gets his wildest dream, and Theatrical just crumbles into itself and craters. Well, what happens? Netflix then, as a sort of a studio and a content creator and the owner of the financial purse strings, would have full editorial control. You guys understand, without any politics, you don't have to be left or right or center. Everybody can get this, that when you are the content creator, and especially when you're the financial purse string holder, you can craft narratives and own messaging and deny certain productions that don't have a message you like, and make sure and promote certain productions that have a message you like. Well, Netflix would have gained full editorial control over anything and everything in the entertainment industry had they kind of really, let's say, destroyed the theatrical industry. Meanwhile, theaters are more decentralized, right? So you've got many creators, many studios, many of those financial purse string holders. It's a little more market driven. It's not just, well, I'm a subscribing member and I get whatever Netflix gives me. It's market driven. I'm going to go and show up and vote with my wallet, and the consumer can pull. There's a pull market in terms of going to see what I want to see. And when people don't give that content, you don't go to the theater, and it's sort of supply and demand. If there's not demand for it, the supply disappears. So Netflix is a centralized push model. Theatrical is a decentralized pull model. The consumer gets to decide. So I think that's just really interesting to consider. that, what would it have looked like had Netflix gained complete editorial control? What I'm suggesting, and that's a little bit of the tinfoil, is you kind of look and you go, listen, take Stranger Things. We had Chosen the season 5 got released in theaters. It did almost $50 million at the domestic box office. I think it was like $47-48 million. Okay, so if The Chosen can do almost $50 million at the domestic box office, I would suggest Stranger Things. I mean, pick a number. Is it 4x, 5, 6x? It's something bigger than The Chosen, I'm sure. Granted, that's not fact based. That's just me making that up on a hunch. But so what is Stranger Things then? $200 million at the domestic box office, and what is it at the global box office? You can't tell me that there's not money being left on the table for that by Netflix. Now, yes, you could absolutely have a great. I could write a great paper on this, right? Of like the pros and cons and the arguments for it. And so to be objective, you'd say, well, all right, Netflix is going to make the point that if I host it exclusively, I'm driving more membership. But the even the subsidizing of the production cost of putting things in theatrical, there is just something counterintuitive to what they're doing. And which is why I keep saying if I was a major shareholder, I would probably be starting to want to be activist and press these guys to start to take advantage of theatrical releases. And so let's just say they had gotten full editorial control. Now let's remind ourselves what happens when Netflix puts out whatever they want. Do you remember Netflix Cuties? Right? And so shout out to a friend today who I was kind of talking about this with somebody, and they reminded me, and I was like, that's right. Honestly, guys, I had completely forgotten about this. And let us not forget, because I think this is important. Netflix greenlighted and produced this and released it. And this is a time when, a lot of us have a lot of sensitivity. So here, let me give a little bit of trigger warning. I talked about my channel being a little bit, let's say, family friendly. I'm going to cover some not family friendly content here. So if that's not your jam, I just want to warn you, I'm going to be showing something here that is offensive to me. I have 3 children. This is deeply offensive. It makes me very angry. And this is why I do not think we should be forgetting that Netflix pushed this content. And at a time in our country where we're having conversations around how we are treating children and whether globally there are even missing children and what is going on and what's the money behind that, what's the culture behind that, what are the hidden things done in the dark that need to be exposed, right? So in the middle of all that swirling, here's Netflix. Let's talk about this a little. So, this picture, I would not say this is tame. I personally take offense at this picture, making kissy lips for little girls and then promoting that online. But of what I'm going to show you, this is very tame. And then they were pushing stuff like this, right? So I don't almost even want to talk about it. I want to move beyond this pretty quickly. But to I guess let's just say it honestly, to sexualize young girls it's not only wrong, it's evil, right? So I am actually suggesting that Netflix was engaging in something evil. This should never have been promoted, and frankly, whoever did this should not ever have a job again. And then, you look here, and I think it needs to be said, what do you see in this picture? These young ladies with all of the underwear is on the outside of their clothing, and this is, published for you guys to watch and promote it as though it's something good. It's honestly really gross, and I already want to move on. So I would just suggest, I think we are having a culture war. And I know that's tinfoil, I understand that, but something, you just have to ask yourself, I'm a very deeply logical person. My wife likes to laugh at me now and then because if something doesn't math, if something, I can't explain it logically, if money's being left on the table and an attack is happening. Rich Greenfield honestly looks very stupid the last week because the arguments he's making are so obviously wrong that either he looks evil or stupid, or a little bit of both, because he's just making very nonsensical, very obviously torn apart arguments, which I have torn apart a little bit, and if I went deeper, could really dismantle those arguments. And he's losing credibility. So what makes a man go and lose credibility, and what makes a man like Sarandos pass up millions or even billions of dollars of revenue, right? So Sarandos is leaving money on the table. Any brand marketer, I talked about how we looked at things at Nike, understands the global relevance and sort of the authentication to a brand of theatrical hits, right? Again, let's talk about Top Gun Maverick. Let's talk about things like Sonic that are driving you to Paramount Plus. Let's talk about the entire Star Wars ecosystem or the entire Marvel ecosystem that's driving you to Disney. You guys get it. Dune is driving people, and DC is now, James Gunn is going to be creating a whole, um, uh, you know, subgenre that is driving people to HBO Max, where DC is going to be hosted. Harry Potter is driving people. So, um, there is a brand relevance to having theatrical hits. And you've got Greenfield desperately spinning. I talked about that. So to me, there just feels like there's only one of two explanations. It's either stubbornness and ego on Sarandos's part, which is what I thought for a long time. You don't get to the top without a pretty big ego. And so you want to be right and you want to say, I know what I'm doing better than everybody else. And sometimes it's hard. He has publicly said he has no interest in driving his customers to theaters. This was when, again, at the same time, line it up against other studios were putting, I think it was Yellowstone, and there was like a Star Trek show. This was kind of the height of COVID too, where they were, experimenting with putting some of those in theaters, and they were doing very well. And then at that time, Sarandos just said flat out, no thanks. And so I think he's wrong and doesn't want to admit it. But lately, I'm just asking myself, the only other explanation I can think of, again, when you logically say, why would a person actively leave money on the table, and a person whose job is to make money for their shareholders, is it just editorial centralization and monopolistic type of plans? Are they continuing to hope they can topple the entire industry and control what content gets created? And I ask, if that last slide is the type of content they were creating, then who are the type of people that Rich Greenfield and Ted Sarandos and others are, and the people who are very vocally in support of Netflix and very vocally anti-theatrical. And by the way, it doesn't take much searching. I searched today, who is he connected to, politically and otherwise. You can spend some time and go figure that out yourself. And I will just let you do your own DD to try to just, I try to generally stay away from politics, but you can go see for yourself who these people are connected to. And I don't know. I just question when people leave money on the table. There's got to be an explanation. But you guys know that we will win. Theatrical is going to win. So let's go.